The original group of companions, the Inn Fellows, was made up of a representative from most of the races. The party itself carried out the theme. Some of the characters were good, Sturm, Karaman, some neutral, Tanis, Tasselhoff, Flint, Raceland, and one evil, Kitiara. Of these, the leader of the group, Tanis, carried the theme further in that he was a half-elf, divided within himself, in love with an elf maiden, Lorana, who represented good, and a human, Kitiara, who was evil. The memories of who created what particular character have become blurred. Harold Johnson is credited with developing the Kender. Tracy Hickman produced Tanis, Lorana, and Kitiara. The gods originated with Jeff Grubb, who gave Raceland hourglass eyes and golden skin. But the majority of the characters came out of hours of discussion and plot development, and many simply grew as they went along. The artists themselves, who were working on the 1985 DragonLace calendar at the time, had a tremendous influence on how the characters looked and dressed. The artists spent many hours with... We'll just take another look at the picture here again before we move on. If I can just turn it a little bit, maybe we can appreciate it without so much glare. The design team learning about the characters and the storyline to which they brought their own unique ideas. It was extremely helpful to have Tanis standing in my office, so to speak, in the calendar painting, says Margaret Weiss, co-author of the DragonLace novels. I knew what he looked like, what he was wearing. I even came to know the intense, serious expression on his face that Larry gave him in the calendar cover painting. Larry's original conception of Raceland also influenced me. There is, to me, a world of suffering in the mage's face that affected me a great deal, and made him my favorite of the characters. Weiss joined the design team in the late fall of 1983, when she was hired as an editor in the book division of TSR. She was originally given the responsibility of developing the plot for the proposed novel series and working with authors to develop it. Although I can't remember being a bit intimidated by people on the design team, particularly Micah Williams, red suspenders, Doug Niles' full beard, and Tracy's habit of talking with his feet propped up on the desk, I was soon enthralled with this world these people had created. I moved into Krynn, lock, stock, and barrel, and I've never left, Weiss laughs. The company's original idea was to contact various authors who would be interested in working on the series, give them a plot outline, and ask them to submit samples of their work. And here is the original conception of the original color rough with oils and acrylics by Larry Elmore of Raceland and Karaman. It's a great, great piece of artwork, isn't it? Great conception for these characters. We made lots of mistakes at the beginning of this project, says Hickman. One was that we thought the action in the novels should follow the action in the game. As this turned out, it made for too many characters in the early novels, one reason we split the party, and made the early novels too long. We had to cut over 100 pages from the first book. There were so many characters to keep track of in those first books, Weiss said with a with a sigh. We kept having to take a head count. Is everyone here? I remember once I left Elliston out of an entire section in the second novel. I simply forgot about him, probably because I never really liked him. He was so good he was boring. I remember going to Tracy, practically in tears, and saying, "Do I really have to put him in? Can't I kill him?" And the writers who submitted material were all good, each in his own way, but none provided exactly what the design team was looking for. We tried working with them, says Weiss, but it soon became clear to Tracy and me that no one knew our world the way we did. My degree in college was in writing. I was a published author, although I'd never published a novel. And I told Tracy that we were the ones to write this book. We took one weekend and wrote the prologue and the first 5 chapters to Dragons of Autumn Twilight. It sounds incredible to me now, but we had lived with the story so long it just poured out. here are these engineering schematics, right, for the DragonLace. And this is Larry Elmore. He's a real stickler for details, and he wants things to work just right and just so. And, he wants the fantasy to be realistic, because if the fantasy isn't realistic enough for him, then he's not buying into the fantasy. It's pretty interesting here. As Lance pivots laterally. So, as the Lance pivots laterally, the shield can pivot. And then over here you can see the pivoting over here. Right? So, the shield rotates on the Lance around the dragon's shoulders and neck. Everything's so functional here, and it's a little piece about that too. It's pretty fantastic. The DragonLace design team realized that if they intended to name this saga after a new weapon, they'd better know what the weapon's powers were. They considered making the lance magical, firing a beam that drew its power from the life force of the dragon itself, but they abandoned the idea because it touched into the realm of science fiction. I'm a stickler for detail, so I got fired up about designing the DragonLace, explains Larry Elmore. I couldn't see how a man sitting on a dragon flying at high speed, spearing other dragons, could keep from getting knocked off. That's a good point. I decided that the lance needed to be fastened to a saddle that would allow it to pivot, to cushion the rider against a jarring blow. If a rider spears a dragon to his right and the dragon continues on, the swinging lance will knock the rider off unless there is a stop of some sort. And he couldn't use a normal shield because his lance would take 2 hands. The solution was a shield that fit over the lance, triangular in shape, so that it could rotate across the dragon's back and offer maximum protection to the rider. Just so intriguing, isn't it? Okay. Now there's no picture for this last part. It's just some more interesting text here. And you do have a PDF of this, so you want to go ahead and read it. And if not, I will read it to you right now. TSR Incorporated decided to take a chance on the 2 unknowns, Weiss and Hickman, and agreed to let them write the books. Although the series was intended to be a trilogy, and we even had the 4th book about Raceland and Karaman in our minds, our editor, Gene Black, prudently had us provide a true ending for the 1st book, in case the series bombed. The game module series was designed to end after the 4th module, recalls Hickman. All of us on the design team and everyone who worked on the project believed in it. But there had never been a role-playing game like this one. And already, a few critics were questioning the use of predetermined characters. Add to that the fact that one book by 2 people no one had ever heard of was going to fall into the world of publishing like a raindrop in the Blood Sea. It was absolutely wonderful of TSR management to take such a big risk. The DragonLace calendar came out in June 1984. The first game modules were introduced at TSR's annual Gen Con game convention in August of that year. Weiss and Hickman had the first novel ready to go in the fall. The games in the calendar were receiving a good response, and people wanted the book. No one could find it on the shelves, remembers Weiss. No one could figure out what had happened to it. Finally, it was discovered that a mistake had been made by our distributor, and very few of the books had been shipped. Once they were, people bought them, read them, and told their friends about them. In January 1985, Dragons of Autumn Twilight hit the bestseller list for the bookstore chains. The artwork undoubtedly played an important role in the success of both books and game modules. Mail coming to the company indicated that many people had picked up the book or the game simply because they were attracted by the stunning artwork. I have to be honest, when I first got my hands on the books, my dad had brought them home to me. He had bought them at a used bookstore about, I think it's maybe 10-ish miles away from my house or so when I was growing up. And I was enthralled by the original cover art on the books, and I couldn't wait to crack them open and start reading these DragonLace books. The artwork and the design on the cover was so enthralling that you had to dive into this world. You couldn't wait. And I wouldn't be reading this to you right now if it weren't for that book, because that's what made me realize that, yeah, I might be good at reading, but I do love and enjoy reading as well. What else made the project such a phenomenal success? The teamwork, the friendship, says Weiss. This was more than another quest to save the world. It was a series about people and their relationships to each other. Especially, it was a series about friends. The friendship I've made in working on the DragonLace project have been one of the best parts of it. Finally, there have been the hundreds of people who have written us, telling us how much pleasure they've had visiting Krynn. As Tracy says, somewhere Krynn exists. I like to think of us all wandering around in it, having our valuables lifted by curious Kender, dodging draconians, and picking up the hats of befuddled old magicians. One of the reasons the world is so alive is that through the artwork we can see it clearly in our imaginations. The TSR artists, both on staff and those who have worked with us freelance, played an important role in the development of the series. We are very pleased to be able to share this artwork, some of it being published for the first time with you. The gods of Krynn look down upon their work and smile. And that ends the first section, and the next section is defining the evil ones. And this says the High Lords, Ariakis, Verminard, Gakken, Ember, Draconians, Oryx, Baz, Bozaks, and Capex. And those are the different breeds of Draconians. So. Let's see the early concept artwork here for the Draconians. This is by these are inks by Larry Elmore. Okay. Let's take a look at what they have to tell us about in this section here. Sylvar and I watched in awe as a dark-robed cleric brought forth a shining golden dragon egg and placed it upon that fore altar. Joining hands, the black-robed magic users and the dark clerics began to chant. The words burned the mind. And you want to stop reading along with me if you don't want spoilers. And then, the golden egg upon the altar began to darken. As we watched, it turned to a hideous green and then to black. The blackened egg upon the altar cracked open, and a larva-like creature emerged from the shell. It was loathsome and corrupt to look upon. The larva split its slime-covered skin, and from its body came the evil forms of Draconians. Gilthanas from Dragons of Spring Dawning. That's the third book in the Chronicles series, so slight spoiler there. Leathery wings sprang from its back. It had the scaly flesh of a reptile. Its large hands and feet were clawed, but it walked upright in the manner of men. The creature wore sophisticated armor that allowed it the use of its wings. The creatures had the face of a man, but it was as if some malevolent being had twisted into that of a reptile. And that was from Dragons of Autumn Twilight, when we first really get our first good look at a Draconian. The design team wanted to create a new race, as Tracy Hickman put it, to replace the overused bad guys, ogres. The theme of good dragons versus bad dragons had already been established. What better guy than a good guy, perverted by the bad guys? They wanted different types of dragon men, loosely tied to each type of metal dragon. Conversations between Elmore and Hickman solidified what the dragon men would look like. They would be vaguely human, upright stance, but they would have wings and look overwhelmingly reptilian. Elmore looked at the established game statistics for these Draconians, as Hickman called them, before beginning, and based his decisions on size and weight on those stats. And then, so you can see ink drawings by Larry Elmore here as he's exploring what he believes the Draconians should look like. Here's a pencil sketch by Clyde Caldwell over here. And down here are some ink drawings by Larry Elmore. Another ink by Larry Elmore. And then this is another pencil sketch by Clyde Caldwell. The Draconians were patterned after the dragons they derived from. Everyone wanted the dragons of Krynn, however, to look different from the standard Advanced Dungeons & Dragons game dragons. While a red dragon from Krynn has the same game statistics as any other red dragon, for example, it has a distinctive look that identifies it as dragon from Krynn, despite the fact that Elmore loves designing things, I could have spent a year just designing stuff. The artists decided that whoever did the first painting of each type of dragon would set the pattern for that dragon and its draconians. Elmore's original draconians, far left on page 18 and 20, have no tails. In the story, draconians sometimes disguise themselves as humans, and as a tail would be very hard to hide. However, when TSR's Dave Sutherland added tails to make draconians look more reptilian, everyone liked the look so well they kept it. But no one ever drew a draconian in disguise. The two draconians at far right are preliminary sketches from Clyde's painting for Dragons of Triumph, the tailless. The tailless draconian at top faces right in the final version of the painting. So, let me take a look at. Here's the tailless one, right? And then here it is with the tail added. These are ink drawings by Larry Elmore on the left and Diana Magnuson. This is Dragons of Faith. And then ink drawings by Dave Sutherland here. Auric draconians, derived from gold dragons, were one of two draconian races capable of using magic, along with Bozaks. Also, gold dragons are the only wingless dragons. Aurics are easily recognized because they, too, have no wings. Compare Larry Elmore's original Auric sketch to Diana Magnuson's spellcasting Auric. While there are differences, the overall similarity is a hallmark of the DragonLace products. All of the artists involved strove to maintain consistency with each other's visions. The effort spent on preliminary planning and design paid off throughout the project, which involved more than a dozen artists. The Aurics below, opposite page, are two of Dave Sutherland's design sketches for Auric armor. Take a look here. You might recognize this thing from the book itself. This is the ink, wash, and drawing by Dennis Bovels from Dragons of Autumn Twilight. You might notice this. This is the first full depiction you see when you read the books of a draconian. When drawing the interior illustrations for Dragons of Spring Dawning, Jeff Butler patterned his creatures after the style of Dennis Bovels, who had illustrated Dragons of Autumn Twilight and Dragons of Winter Night. Note the similarities between Dennis's draconian bottom right and Jeff's top. Careful readers will also notice that none of these draconians have tails. Jeff's portrait of Gakken shows him in a contemplative, scheming mood. Gakken wears the extremely heavy armor characteristic of civic draconians. All sorts of weapons here sketched out. Fat knife, small axe, javelins. All right. After Larry completed his draconian design sketches, they still needed armor and weapons. Dave Sutherland of TSR's graphics department has a long-standing interest in ancient and medieval weapons and armor, so Elmore turned his sketches over to Sutherland for dressing. Working on tissue laid over Elmore's sketches, Sutherland designed a multitude of armored suits: heavy plate armor for the civics, light leather armor for the Aurics and Bozaks, chainmail, banded armor, and dozens of others. The armor shown on pages 18 through 25 is based on Sutherland's designs. The weapons used by the draconians were designed for specific purposes. The long, hooked pole arms are used to knock charging horsemen off their mounts, or snag an enemy's armor and drag him to the ground. Here we go. Reasoning that draconians rely more on brute force than finesse in fighting, Sutherland designed swords that would be effective as chopping rather than stabbing weapons. Some of the very elaborate serrated blades were designed more for their ferocious appearance than a particular use. A medieval weaponsmith would have had a very hard time forging such a weapon, so the draconian who possess them are rightfully proud of them. What do you mean we're lost? These are acrylics by Keith Parkinson from the 1988 DragonLace calendar. This is awesome. An awesome piece, isn't it? Oh my goodness. Some Dragon High Lord armor in here, it looks like. It's an ink drawing by Jeff Butler from Dragons of Spring Dawning. Pretty cool picture over here. This is from Dragons of Hope, Oils and Acrylics by Keith Parkinson from 1985 DragonLace calendar. Elmore first designed the Dragon High Lord armor above to look like a dragon, but he thought it might be too cumbersome to be practical for someone who had to ride and fight on the back of a flying dragon. A High Lord's armor has to be very heavy to protect him in battle, but also has to be flexible, allowing him to strike and dodge in any direction. It also must be fully enclosed to protect him from the cold and wind while flying. Notice the eyes in the helmet at bottom left. The eye slits are very small, giving excellent protection, but they are indented, making them look much larger. Keith Parkinson's painting of Ember and Verminard chasing Blaze was nearly finished when, one night, Parkinson took it home. The painting came back the next day with an entirely different background. The dragons stayed the same, but, in fact, there is a completely different painting beneath this one, which the artist just wasn't satisfied with. The artist's enthusiasm for the project and constant striving for excellence contributed immensely to the superb quality of all of the DragonLace art. Pretty exciting, right? Yeah, we'll get there, don't worry. Dave Sutherland suggested the Dragon High Lord's designs previous page, upper left, but it was decided that they were too complicated. Consequently, Elmore modified his own design and set the tone for High Lords to come. The original design was not intended to be any particular Dragon High Lord. Once the basic principles were established, each artist created his own suit of High Lord armor to suit the personality of the individual High Lord. And this is a pen and ink drawing by Diana Magnusson from Dragons of Deceit. Dragons of War, opposite, was my inspiration for writing Sturm's final battle, recalls Weiss. I had it hanging on the wall in front of me, and there were times I literally couldn't see it through my tears. Keith, I believe, portrays the battle as taking place at sunset. I wanted it at sunrise, however, to symbolize that though Sturm had died, his sacrifice was the dawn of hope for the world. Here's this. This is fantastic here. Look at this. This is the inspiration. This is going to happen in Dragons of Winter Night. This thing inspired one of the most important scenes in that book. This is such a great picture. Try to get it so where you don't have any glare on it, but it's Verminard, and you see Tasselhoff, and you see Lord Toad, and there's Ember. That's cool. That looks great. This is Dragons of Flame, Oils by Jeff Easley from the 1985 DragonLace calendar. I wish I had that calendar. I might have to buy it, if I can find a copy of it. Jeff Easley's painting of Verminard made him a worthy foe. Although his face is hidden by the mask, his character is obvious by his arrogant pose. Strong and muscular, he seems to disdain armor, believing himself to be invincible. The huge, slathering red dragon Ember appears a perfect partner. Easley knew the pose was critical, as can be seen by the numerous changes he made in the hand. You can see all of the different items he's changing in the hand, exactly how he wants the hand to look. It's fantastic. Gotta love the attention to detail. This one, DragonLace. This is actually the cover of The Legend of Huma. This is called Dragon Duel, Oils by Jeff Easley from the 1998 Dragonlance calendar, and it also happens to be the cover art for the book The Legend of Huma, from the Canticle of the Dragon, way back when. And then next we get to the Heroes of the Lance. Tanis, Sturm, Riverwind, Goldmoon, Raceland, Karaman, Tika, Chrysania, Lorana, Tass, Flint, Kitiara. And we'll get to that in the next video.